Hello, Dave and Tim here with the latest single malt review, and as a long-term fan of Glenallachie and Benriach, today's whisky is going to be rather special to me.
I suppose you could call this one the next generation. I was lucky enough to be at a Glenallachie, of course, which this whisky is. Probably read that already, or maybe not, and we'll go into the font choice later on. A Glenallachie tasting of the new range, and there's a bit of a preamble on this one, so stick with me or skip ahead if you don't care. But I think it's pretty important to understand how we got here, because it's fairly convoluted route. As Dave says, whisky favourites, Glendronach and Benriach, and Glenglassaugh, I suppose, if you're fans of the company itself. They were the trio of distilleries owned by Billy Walker and his Benriach Distilling Company. They sort of acquired them as time went on, and they were pretty profoundly good and very indie whisky, and we've done quite well by those.
Yes.
Recently he sold up a lot of them to Brown-Forman, so your bourbon people over in America, and went along and bought a new distillery, well, new to his collection anyway, and sort of started the whole thing up again with the Glenallachie Distilling Company, sort of fairly similar modus operandi, I suppose. They also bought upwards of, I think, 150,000 casks of stock to work with, and of those, of course, they haven't distilled any whisky of their own yet. Well, they might have done a wee bit. It'll be many, many years before we see what new whisky under their curatorship looks like, but this is what they have blended together from the oodles and oodles of Glenallachie stock that they inherited with the purchase of the distillery. And this one is the 12-year-old, which I thought I would rescue from the tasting as something a bit more material, in addition to my hot takes on the other whisky, which we'll go into once we've got a dram and we're not so dry up in here. The 12-year-old, important as well, because it's the only one that's going to roll over to the next batch. The 12-year-old is pretty much zipped up, done. That's what it's going to be for the near future. All the other ones, and my takes and scores, they're only for batch number 1. All the other whiskies batched, so something like 1,000 cases, I think, for the most of them, and then they'll reblend, and it could be quite a different creature. So keep that in mind if you're shopping with my advice in the future. Check that batch number. Anyway, without further ado, let's crack in here and have a wee look. There's the box. So, as you might expect from a Billy Walker joint, it is all natural, 46%, uncoloured, unchill filtered. So that is tick, 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 3 boxes in a row. All of the good things we like to see in our quality presented whisky. And I almost, that'll turn up in my email in about 5 minutes, I'm sure, got the really hardcore information about the cask management on these, but the 12-year-old especially has some rather interesting cask management, which makes for, as we I think will discover, a rather interesting 12-year-old Speyside whisky. Speyside by name only, I would say, on this one, because you'll have to see what you think. I think this is a distinctly Highland charactered whisky, and I think that's because of the unusual cask types they have used.
Good.
But we'll have a wee sniff, and I'll go further down the hole on that one.
Anything that evokes their Glendronach roots is going to be good in my books.
Yeah, that's going to come up, don't you worry.
Yeah. Can you remind me again of the cask combinations we've got here?
Cask combos from here, and this is me recalling a PDF slide from 2 nights ago, so give me a little bit of rope to hang myself here. It's made from a lot of different casks. Right. A lot of them are European oak. The conspicuous thing that I noted was there is the only American wood in here is virgin oak. So this is probably, in terms of cask makeup, most of this is coming from sherry matured whisky. Oloroso PX. I don't think there was any port. I think mostly Oloroso PX. That's where the volume's coming from, because I don't think they'd use an enormous quantity of virgin oak. That would be quite unusual for a Scotch whisky. So yeah, this one fairly light on the American wood, and no refill bourbon at all. So yeah, it's subsequently a very, very different whisky, and it makes no bones about that immediately.
Ooh, yeah. That is a relatively mild nose up front. Right. It's not super
strong
and
There's
punchy.
No burn, that's for sure, but it's...
It is rich, though.
It's very rich. It's very rich, and that's kind of the theme of this whisky. It is going in a very Glendronach direction immediately.
There's pancakes with syrup, hot buttered toast.
Yeah, it's buttery, sort of very, very smooth, and butterscotch. Butterscotch is a huge, huge thing here. The box will tell us the official notes. I've abandoned it. What do we have here? We have butterscotch honey with raisins and mocha in the background, and I think that's pretty fair enough. There's just a few extras on here that I don't think they quite caught. I think there is a distinctly floral element to this. There's a rose and violet.
Yeah, a little vanilla.
Honeysuckle. Yeah, very, very, very floral, and I think it almost needs that because it's more important in the palate. This is a very hugely rich whiskey, and that's fine on the nose, but rich whiskies like that have a danger. They cut it a bit close to becoming a bit sickly sweet on the palate, but this brings some ammunition to counteract that. So let's have a look at the palate.
Wow, that is weighty and oily. That is a dense palate. It sits on the tongue, it's warming, and then it's just wave after wave of syrupy cakes, all kinds of desserts, florals, caramel nuts.
To give the
very
official
sweet
notes,
fruit.
It has honey, marzipan, and bananas, with more butterscotch, raisins, and mocha. And that's pretty accurate. The butterscotch is dominant, very, very dominant as a tasting note. And that, in my book, is dangerous for a whiskey because that can make it a bit top-heavy, and it needs to, if it's going to have so much sort of syrupy butterscotch, it better be bringing something to freshen it up, and it does. It just doesn't necessarily say so on its own tasting notes. The floral aspect is still here, but there's a citrus quality too.
Yeah, it's like a lemon drizzle cake is coming to mind. It's got a that sweet dessertiness, which I'm loving already. Just a little bit of a zing, a bit of zest there, just to sharpen things slightly, so it's not simply a fug of sweetness enveloping your senses.
There's a lot of that lifting, freshening, zesty lemon.
Yeah.
And right at the end, when whiskies can really, really suffer from being too sweet, it's where it becomes most obvious. Once that alcohol freshness and burn begins to die away, there's just a little bit of black pepper, which freshens things up to no end. And I think it only just, but it's sort of like a pole vaultist, just sort of skimming the bar. It almost falls over for me, but it doesn't. And because it doesn't, it's a really, really dynamic, almost daring, dangerous whiskey. And that's pretty good to see.
It's so sweet and rich, though.
Now, I'll put a wee bit of water in because it'll super be able to take some water.
Yeah.
Won't do too much, though.
There's more of a floral character on the nose now. That's been awakened to it all.
I'm of two minds as to whether that benefits it or not. I think it probably is better without. This makes it taste a lot younger. There's a real keen lash to the alcohol now, which there wasn't before.
It's enlivened some of the pepper and a little bit of a chili flavour too.
So it's almost like it's gone from almost too sweet to almost too fresh and dry. With that addition of water. So you'll have to sort of experiment, I suppose, if you've got a bottle at home as to which one you prefer. But it is a pretty, I won't say it's night and day, but it's a pretty significant change.
Still, that's bringing out some of the characters which are mentioned on the label, which I haven't tasted previously. Mocha, for instance, there's now a hint of espresso there and some actual dark chocolate. Think chili chocolate or sea salt chocolate. That kind of bitter dessert quality starting to come through, just that little bit of water.
Just right on the end. I think chocolate and mocha are pretty similar flavour profiles. I don't drink any mochas, but I do eat dark chocolate, and so that's what it's sort of speaking to me about. Either way, it's a whiskey depending on how you approach it. You could say this is a bit of a jumble, or this is sort of dynamic and daring. And I think the truth is it sort of meets in the middle somewhere. It is a bit of a jumbled together whiskey. It's one they've sort of thrown together with all of these casks, and I doubt they've walked through and tasted all 150,000 of them. So they're probably working with a pretty mixed palate, we'll say. Putting this one together, and I think the result is sort of indicative. of that. I already scored this one in downtime during the tasting, so I can simply glance to my notes here. I gave this one an 85.
Yeah.
Well, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'll go quite a bit higher. This one, for me, earns an 89. It is it's sort of a 3-course meal, and every course is another dessert.
Yeah, I thought you'd like this one.
Pancakes and waffles with syrup and butter up front. It is buttery, creamy, sweet. Then there's maybe some dark chocolate brownie with a hint of chili, something rich and spicy and filling. And to finish off is lemon drizzle cake and a lemon meringue. Just a bit of, still some sweetness, but just a little hint of citrus and acid there too. So, yeah, if you like your whiskey sweet, as I do, you're going to love this one. It is a real smorgasbord of tastiness.
And if you want to know about the rest of the range, I'll just go over my hot takes from the tasting now, so you can get a very, very abbreviated look at the rest of the things here. They do a 10-year-old cask strength, which I completely forgot to score, but it is more or less what you'd expect. It's a fresher, livelier, much, much stronger. I think it was all of 57%, and fairly well priced cask strength batch, but that one will be very, very short-lived, even more so than the other batches, so that one will roll over to batch 2 fairly shortly. No particular flags raised for me either way on that one. It's sort of what you'd expect from a cask strength Speyside whisky. The 18 was actually my favourite. That I thought, rather than this one with its sort of very, very butterscotchy, very, very rich, heavy, that one was hugely fresh and flowing. It was a very, very fast-moving whisky across the palate, and I really, really liked that. That one did have used American wood. It was more conventionally put together, and whereas this goes in an almost Glendronach direction, I thought the 18 went in much more of a Benriach direction, and that's the direction I like to go in as well. So maybe it was no surprise that was my favourite there. I thought that had as I say, good fast-moving palate, but there was a significant waxiness to it as well, almost a Glenallachie waxiness that really hung around and coated the mouth. I thought that was really, really good. But in addition to that, there was spice, chocolate, marmalade, and what else have I got? A significant bit of sulphur on that as well. So some older sherry wood going into that as well. Oh no, ignore the sulphur, that's the next one. Erase that from your mind. Either way, the score I gave to the 18, and this is a danger score because it was only from a tasting, was a 92. I thought that was an absolutely stellar whisky. Sadly, the price represents that. It's twice the price of the 12, depending on where you shop, so you have to make that value judgment yourself. Dave, can you please hit spacebar or any key? We have just lost the screen. Here we are. They also did a 25. That was a very, very Glendronach-esque whisky. It was almost like a recreation of Glendronach, I thought. Very, very typically sherry matured. This is the one that had the sulphur in it. And chocolate and marmalade. Very, very long finish. I thought it lacked a little bit of freshness, especially tasting it off the back of the 18. I thought that was just getting a little bit over-oaked, maybe a little bit stuffy. It was getting a bit stymied by that sherry matured stuff. But if you like older whisky, and specifically older Glendronach, which might become harder to find now that Brown-Forman's in charge, maybe feeling a bit less creative with the range, that might be an option there if you're willing to pay for it. There is no such thing as a cheap 25-year-old whisky after all, and this is no exception. I scored that one an 89. And they also do vintage releases, and very much the same mould as the Benriach and Glendronach vintages, so these will be individual casks from individual years, and they will sort of range up and down, and you can kind of pick one that seems right for you, because they normally have pretty good information and tasting notes about those. Those also not particularly cheap, but hey, individual cask whisky, it's never really going to be. We tried 2 of those. I thought I enjoyed one far more than the other. They were both sherry casks. One was a massive leaker and had gone all the way down to 45% in its 29 years. The other one was 28 years old, still striding along at 54%. I thought that one was the favourite there, if you are wondering. They were in 1989 and 1990 respectively, if you're shopping for those. I did not score those because I didn't have the mental space available, and they would have needed much more scrutiny, really. And that's about that for the Glenallachie. I have to stop myself from saying Craigellachie every single time, but I think I'm just about getting there. Oh, and I said I'd make fun of the font.
Yes.
Can't forget that. The font, which I think looks like something you'd see on the next Kung Fu Panda movie, is apparently derived from some ancient Pictish engravings they found near the distillery, Glenallachie, translating into Gaelic, of course, the Valley of the Rocks, the Valley of the Stones. So, I think it's terrible. But you never know, they might be able to change it before they get too typecast, but alternatively, you might think it's fun.
I'm a sucker for anything in purple, so the fact they're trying something a bit different, that works for me.
Yeah, you give us your thoughts on the font, I suppose. But hey, in the world of coverage, even infamy is still for me, I suppose. But anyway, all publicity is good publicity, so like and share. Ha! Sludge it! Catch you back soon.